Chapter 1 notes, integers. This section of the notes is meant to be a review of integers and their basic operations. We will be adding integers, subtracting integers, multiplying and dividing integers, and comparing them. Feel free at any time during these notes to stop the video or rewind it or fast forward if you already feel like you understand this, etc. So, what are integers? Integers are the positive and negative whole numbers and 0. So this number line at the top of the notes is a very good representation of what the integers are. Okay, it's all the negative whole numbers, all the positive whole numbers, and 0 itself. When we're adding integers together, if they have the same sign, we simply add them together and keep the same sign. So 4 plus 9 ends up being positive 13. And it's positive because the 4 and the 9 are both positive, and when you add two positives together, you're going to end up with a positive answer. On the second example, negative 3 plus negative 5, since I'm adding two negative numbers together, the answer is going to be negative as well. Same idea. If you're adding two numbers with the same sign, that sign is going to stay in the answer. When you have different signs, things can get a little more confusing. Like in this case, negative 9 plus 5 in our next example. Negative 9 on the number line, if you look up above, means I'm going to go 9 to the left. And then adding 5 to that would be like starting there and going 5 to the right. Notice I end up at negative 4. Some people have a hard time remembering if that answer should be positive or negative when they add integers like that. And one of the keys is that if you look, the 9 is bigger than the 5. So the 9, since it's negative, is going to dominate this problem, making the final answer negative. There's not enough positive number here to cancel out with the negative 9. Second example, 5 plus negative 2. The answer is 3. And again, if you want to look at it up above on the number line, which is I think a really good way to picture it, I'd have 5 in the positive direction, the plus 5, and then I'm adding a negative 2, meaning I'm going backwards 2. So my final answer is 3. Since the 5 is a bigger number than negative 2, the 5 is going to win and keep this answer positive. Now, let's move down to subtracting integers. Now, when you're subtracting integers, a common way to think of this is that what you could do is add the opposite. And all this means is that the problem 4 minus 5 could become 4 plus negative 5, if you want to think of it that way. And then that problem simply becomes, like the problem above, adding two integers of different signs. And since the 5 is bigger than the 4, the final answer will be negative. So 4 minus 5 ends up being 4 plus negative 5, and that's negative 1. So basically, you would never have to do a subtraction problem ever again. Because anytime it's subtraction, you're allowed to, I'll do it in green, make it an addition problem, but then you have to make the sign of the number its opposite. So 4 minus 5 is the same as 4 plus negative 5. And that helps some kids do these problems. The second example, we have 7 minus 3, and that's pretty straightforward. It's just a subtraction problem. The answer is 4. If you wanted to turn it into adding the opposite problem, the 7 minus 3 would become 7 plus negative 3. And sometimes that's easier for kids to see that the final answer is 4. Negative 2 minus 7, final answer is negative 9. And if you want to change it to add the opposite problem, negative 2 minus 7 you would make it addition, but then you have to make the 7 negative. So it'd be -2 plus -7. Again, some kids find that easier to deal with, and the answer is -9. The fourth example is subtracting a -6. If you add the opposite in this problem, it becomes -1. I'll rewrite the problem first. If I'm going to add the opposite, I would change this to addition, but then I'd have to make -6 be the opposite of itself, which would be +6. So this problem is really -1 plus 6, which is 5. So hopefully, you've done this before and you've developed some strategies to help you get these correct. You can always refer to this note sheet as you're doing homework or taking quizzes or tests. So if you need extra help, you can refer to this. Now we're going to compare integers using a less than or greater than sign. Hopefully this is a review as well. Let's just review the symbol for a second. Remember, the bigger number goes on the side of the opening, and the smaller number goes on the side of the arrow. Some people like to think of this as like a crocodile mouth. Those are teeth. And that the crocodile would want to eat the bigger of the two numbers. Okay? It would want the bigger meal. To relate this to the number line above, remember that as you move to the right on the number line, I'm going to draw the green arrow here on the top. As you move to the right, the numbers become larger, okay, or bigger. And as you move to the left on the number line, the numbers are smaller. So a number like -7 is smaller than -6, okay? So the more negative something is, the smaller it is. So on this first example, -2 and -8, comparing those two, -2 would be greater than -8, so I would put the mouth towards the -2. And the arrow is pointing towards the smaller number. Now, comparing -1 and -2, -2 is smaller than -1, so the mouth would open towards the -1. Comparing a negative number and a positive number, like -1 and 3 above here, or on the notes, obviously a positive number is always going to be bigger than a negative. So the mouth would go towards the 3. And comparing 0 and -5, -5 is smaller than 0 because it's to the left of 0 on the number line. Just to remind you how to read these, I'm going to read this one I've just circled in red. You'd read that as -1 is greater than -2. And if I was going to read the next one below that, I would say -1 is less than 3. Okay, remember on inequalities like this, you read them left to right. Now, the last thing we want to review is multiplying and dividing integers. Again, I know you've done this before, this is just a review. When you're multiplying a positive number times a positive number, the answer will be positive. When you're multiplying a negative times a negative number, the answer will again be positive. So whenever the signs of the numbers are the same, like positive, positive, or negative, negative, the answer will always be positive. If you're multiplying a positive number times a negative number, that answer will always be negative. So if the two numbers you're multiplying together have different signs, where one's a positive and one's a negative, then the answer is always negative. So our examples here, -3 times -5, the answer would be positive 15. That's the negative times the negative example. Or two negative numbers multiplied together will be positive. 4 times -2, that's a positive times a negative. In that case, the answer will be negative, so it'll be -8. That's an example of this rule. Positive times a negative is negative. And the third example, -7 times -4, again, that's the negative times the negative example. That would be positive 28. We didn't do the two positive number example, because that's pretty straightforward. You've been doing that forever, but like 3 times 5 is obviously 15. They're both positive, so you get a positive answer. So as you're doing problems related to integers, feel free to reference these notes or to watch the video again if you're a little confused. But good luck with your homework.